Hello and welcome to the Healthy Smith Show. Today I have a lovely guest, Chrissy Gray. Chrissy has been working as a complementary health therapist in Cambridge in the UK since 1993. She uses a combination of herbal medicine, iridology and nutritional therapy. She also offers reflexology and Reiki. What a lovely combination. I'm really curious about the iridology. Chrissy has helped many people reach levels of increased health and well-being, making it easier for them to be vibrant, energetic, and live more fulfilling lives. Chrissy is going to explain how our eyes can help guide us to healthy eating and what diseases can be linked to your eye color. I would love to hear about that. Chrissy, welcome to the show.
Hi, welcome. Thank you for welcome.
Welcome to our viewers. We already have a few viewers. And Chrissy, can you tell me, how did you get into natural health?
Well, it's a long story. How long have you got? When I was a child, I was always interested. I used to go off in the fields behind the house for hours on end, looking at the butterflies and all the wildflowers. And then in the autumn, I would go foraging for wild mushrooms. So I had this connection with nature when I was very young, but I got slightly disconnected from it as I was growing up. And it wasn't until I was in my mid-20s that I started to become interested in things like homeopathy, essential oils and herbs, because my husband and I had become very interested in animal rights and animal welfare. And I'd read a lot of stuff about drugs that I wasn't happy about. So I wanted to live a life that was more holistic and more natural. And we were planning a trip to Asia, and I wanted to put together a natural remedy first lady in Saffron Walden near Cambridge, because I heard she sold essential oils, which were only just then becoming popular. Went out to this beautiful house in Saffron Walden, and the smells were just fantastic. You know, the peppermint oil was just so clean and uplifting, and you could tell that it was medicinal. You could tell it had antibacterial properties. So I purchased some lavender oil, some peppermint oil and some eucalyptus oil. And I took those on my travels to India with my husband. We sold up our shares in a computer company that we were running, and we went off to Asia, and we used them a lot, you know, for minor things like insect bites. But we bought a motorbike in Delhi in India, and which we started off just before the monsoon season broke. And we were going through the foothills of the Himalayas, and we turned the corner on the motorbike. I was on the back and my husband was riding it, and we slid on some oil on the road, and we did come off the bike. I was okay, fortunately, but my husband's leg was very badly burnt from the exhaust that had fallen onto his lower leg. So I got out my lavender, got out my tea tree and applied it very soon after the accident. And I wanted him to stop and get some, you know, hospital attention, because it was like a 2nd-degree burn. But he wanted to carry on riding his motorbike. He was being very stoic, and he wanted to get to our destination. Eventually, Dalai Lama is in exile, and all the Tibetans are in exile further up into the mountains. And I said, you've got to go and get some attention for your leg. And he said, well, there's only, you know, the Tibetan hospital. And I said, well, go to the Tibetan hospital. And they beautifully fixed up his leg, but they also sent him home with these funny little brown pills of very bitter, disgusting tasting herbs. But he took them, and not only did he feel better in himself and have more energy, his leg, you know, it had been dressed conventionally, but he healed incredibly quickly. So I found this fascinating. And we carried on our journey through India, and we got up to Ladakh in northern India. And the people up there were very knowledgeable about mountains. So we're like 14,000 feet above sea level here. But we used to go walking with the people, and they'd say, well, you know, we'd use this plant for digestive problems, or we'd use this one if there were boils, and so on. So I was getting this sort of education on our holiday, all about, you know, holistic herbs and remedies. So it was sinking in more and more into my consciousness. And also what was happening, because I would describe myself as being spiritually asleep before I went to India. But because of the effect of being in India and going to Buddhist temples and things like that, I was beginning to waken up spiritually as well. And I don't think that you can extract, you know, the physical and the mental and the emotional from each other. It's very, very important to acknowledge all sides of, you know, our being, really. And we carried on. We got to Kashmir, which is where Shiva is very, very popular. And we were staying on a lotus flowered lake, and there was more connection with the sort of Ayurvedic medicine there. So I was being permeated by all these wonderful spiritual vibrations, and also, you know, in India, Ayurvedic medicine is very, very popular and very powerful. So I was learning bits and pieces about the Ayurvedic medicine when we were in Kashmir as well. So it was this lovely journey which woke me up on so many different levels. And then we toddled off to Thailand, because although India can caress you with one hand, you can also feel like you've been beaten with the other, because it's such a sensorial experience with the colours and beautiful smells and flower garlands hanging everywhere. But also there's the smell of, you know, things that aren't so pleasant. And, you know, there's so many people, and, you know, as a Westerner, you're very crowded sometimes with people wanting your attention. So we went off to Thailand to have ourselves a lovely break on the beach, be beach bums for 6 weeks. And that was lovely, because, you know, you're under the coconut palms and you've got all the exotic flowers growing around you, and wonderful mangoes, papayas. It was actually, I was lying on the beach one day that I was going to study herbal medicine when I came back to the UK. I was lying on the beach, sunning myself, enjoying being in that lovely exotic situation. And this voice in my head said, you're going to study herbal medicine when you go home. So we went back to the UK. The first thing I did pretty much is looked up for a course, and I went to a place in Norfolk called Herbs Hands Healing. There was a wonderful teacher there, Jill Davis, and I did my first year herbal training with her. And it was a very holistic herbal course, in as much as it included naturopathic nutrition, meditation, and anything really that was natural and would help someone heal. So things like skin brushing, hydrotherapy, you know, hot and cold repetitions to increase the circulation. And I absolutely loved it, and it was life-changing for me. At the same time, I had things going on in my personal life. I lost my brother to suicide, so that start to find out about my spiritual self and was there life after death, and also look into mediumship as well. And healing came from that for me. I joined a healing group, and also my marriage broke down as well. So it was my Saturn return, although I didn't know it at the time. And it was a real life turning upside down time for me, but it was one of the best things that ever happened to me in my life. And I say that my brother gave me a huge gift by, helping me wake up spiritually. And then I had pretty much done my first year of herbal training, and there was the option to go on and do 2 more years to become a master herbalist, which I did. And I'm happy to say that I passed that very well. And after that, we were encouraged to go and study Iridology as a diagnostic tool. Oh, I'm not actually meant to say diagnostic tool. I meant to say analysis tool, because that's what the conventional medicine people don't allow us to say. So it's a analysis tool, and I did that for another year with a guy in London called Adam Jackson, who's written a very good book about the basics of iridology. Following that, I wanted to give my clients a more rounded service. So I was giving them the analysis with the iridology, and I was treating what I found in the iris with the herbalism and also my naturopathic knowledge. But I wanted to have a touch therapy of some kind. So I decided on reflexology, which I'd always liked massaging people's feet. And I trained as a reflexologist, which I think is profoundly relaxing for people. And I believe that when we are profoundly relaxed, we heal so much better. And then there was a few years went by. Well, actually what happened was I had a child who had severe cerebral palsy, and it was a very, very difficult time in my life. Again, another life-turning upside-down incident. And life was actually quite dark for me. And a friend of mine, he gave me reflexology treatments, was doing my feet one day. He said, I just the most amazing, you must go and do this. And which was just incredible. And I thought, wow, I have to do this. And 2 days later, synchronistically, through the letterbox came a letter saying, it was a company that I knew that did natural health products. Oh, we've just got a Reiki master who's running a Reiki level 1 attunement in a week's time. So off I went and became attuned to Reiki. And then about a year later, I did my Reiki masters and haven't looked back since. And it was just the light at the end of the tunnel for me at that time in my life. And it set in motion an even deeper spiritual transformation. And it was fantastic for my daughter as well, because I could, she was very severe. She had, she was fed through a tube, she was blind, she was epileptic, she had no way of communicating with us. And it was for her to be Reiki'd. And in fact, after I'd done my Reiki 2, we managed to stop some of these really severe spasms that she was having by Reikiing her. And the paediatrician couldn't believe it. He just, you know, because she hadn't had drugs for them. So I'm so glad that just for that alone, but every day I've used Reiki on myself, my clients, my children, my plants. So I wouldn't be without Reiki for the world. It's been such a rich, rewarding journey, and I hope it, you know, continues. So.
Indeed.
And then when I had my second daughter, I decided that I would go into nutrition in a deeper way. So with the herbalism course, it was very naturopathic, but I wanted to so I did another course while I was pregnant with my second daughter, and that was again, you know, very, very useful in conjunction with the iridology and the herbalism. So that's how I find myself sitting in front of you today.
Could you tell us what is iridology and how does it work?
So why am I showing you an owl? Well, let's the history of iridology. The owl is because a young boy, 11-year-old boy, a Hungarian young 11-year-old boy, was on holiday, and the owl was caught up in some wire, and the young boy, a kind young boy, decided he was going to free the owl from the wire, but the owl's leg got caught or dug into the young boy's arm. And so he tried to free the owl, but he couldn't. So in the end, he had to break the owl's leg to actually free himself of the owl. As I say, he was the owl's leg, and he nursed it back to health and then let the owl go. He returned to this same holiday destination the next year, and the owl, because he had become tame, returned to see the boy. And the boy noticed at approximately 6 o'clock in the iris, the coloured part of the eye, there was a black mark. He didn't think any more of it, to be a natural doctor. And he used homeopathy to help his mother heal from a very serious condition. And he helped the village people around him with homeopathic remedies. But the local, and so he carried on doing what he was doing. But a few years later, he trained as a physician himself. He trained as a physician. Yeah. He then, when he was holding surgeries, noticed that his patients' eyes had markings in them. And he remembered the owl. So he started to study the connection between what was going on physically with his patients and the markings in their eyes.
Interesting.
I mean, he did quite a lot of research on this, and he actually took a paper to a group of physicians in London, quite an eminent group of physicians, but they rejected it, completely rejected it.
Yeah.
About the same time as this young doctor was looking at the markings in the eyes, there was also a Swedish pastor called Niels Liljeqvist, and he had noticed after having a vaccination, he'd had some very bad side effects. So he'd contracted malaria, he'd got swollen lymph glands. So he had to have a lot of quinine, which is what they used to treat malaria, medication they used to treat malaria. And also they were using iodine locally on his swollen gland. It started to turn colour. They started to go more green. And when he looked at them, he saw lots more yellow pigmentation in his iris. So he wrote research on the colours in the iris as well.
Yeah.
This sort of information found its way to other European doctors in Germany and Austria and places like that. And they found that the information then found its way to Australia and America. That is the very first iris map that Ignaz von Petzli put together. It's actually in German. It's been translated into German from Hungarian. I don't have the Hungarian version. So that was the one which the early iridologists based their work on. This is the iris map that most iridologists today base their work on. This is what they use. Okay. Some people have created new iris maps, but if you imagine as reflexology, the iris, the coloured part of the eye, the body is actually mapped out on the coloured part of the eye.
Goodness, yeah.
As I say, the map. So it's quite complicated. It takes quite a while to study that and learn that. So the right iris reflects the right side of the body, and the left iris, the left side of the body. So you will see that on the right-hand side of the right iris, there is a marking for the liver, which we mainly find on the right. Well, we find it on the right side of the body. And then the left iris has the spleen, which we find on the left side of the body as well. And then around the pupil area is the stomach zone. And so you can see a ring around the pupil area. Yeah. And then there's a wavy line about a third of the way out from the pupil to the periphery. Yeah. Can you see that?
Yes.
Yeah. That's representative of the intestines and also part of the nervous system called the autonomic nervous system. So that's like the automatic nervous system, which controls breathing and digestion and heart rate. So iridology is a non-invasive analysis tool which looks at the markings in the iris of the eye and the colours in the iris of the eye and their relationship to the body health. It's what we see are genetic predispositions, genetic markers to strengths or weaknesses in the body. Have to actually manifest physically. It's like a map, but you don't have to necessarily follow a certain path. It's just giving you information so that you're aware of where your strengths and your weaknesses are. You can't tell certain things from the iris. What you can tell the tissue integrity. So you can see if an area is weak or if it's prone to toxicity. You can see if there's acidity in the blood, for example, in the bloodstream. What you can't tell is if someone is pregnant or if there are kidney stones or gallstones or specific diseases. You can't identify specific diseases. We're looking at how efficiently or inefficiently the cells are likely to be in the different parts of the body. So if you imagine, nobody knows for sure exactly how it works. There's emerging research and ongoing research. that you've got cells all over the body, nerve cells all over the body, and information is sent through those cells, through the nervous system and up through the optic nerve, and then the cells in the iris of the eye record how inefficiently or efficiently the body areas are working, the reflexes are working. So as you know, with reflexology, perhaps, you know that the head and the brain area is the big toe or the thumb. Well, in iridology, the head and the brain area is located at the top of the iris, and then the lower organs are at the lower part of the iris. And as we've already discussed, we've got the stomach and intestinal area in the central part of the iris. And then what we've got, if you can visualize these concentric rings overlaying the iris, the coloured parts of the eye.
Yeah.
We've got the stomach zone in the middle, we've got the intestinal zone, then we've got the blood and the glandular zone. We've got the muscular, skeletal, the lymph system, which is like the body's waste disposal system, the arterial circulation, and the skin. So if we see a marking in the iris, it gives us an idea which area is affected. So if you go back to the Jensen's map, the one before, I don't know if you can see on the left eye, you can see what looks like at approximately, if we're on the 12-hour clock, at approximately 8 o'clock, you can see a strange shape, which looks a bit like the vertebra of the spine.
Yes, yes.
Can you see that?
Yeah.
Yes. So that is the spine, in fact. But if there was a problem with someone's back, if you looked in the muscular zone, you could see whether it's the muscles that are the problem in the back, or whether it's the skeleton, or when we're right up close to that wavy line, that tells us about the nerves of the back as well. So the problem is in the body. You know, if somebody just came for back pain, you could identify, well, do we need to work on the muscles or the skeleton, or look at, you know, giving herbs to improve the nerve supply, or herbs to increase circulation. So that's where iridology is very, very useful. Okay, so yeah, so just to go back, if you have an iridology examination, you will either have a torch and a light, so the iridologist can look at the iris of the eye and make recordings of what they see, but most people tend to photograph the eye, which then you can blow up and make much more detailed analysis from.
Oh, here's my next question. What do these colors and the markings in the eye mean?
Okay, so it sounds odd, but when you go to an iridologist, the first thing that the iridologist needs to tell you is whether you've got a blue eye, a mixed eye, or a true brown eye. True brown eye is obvious, but blue-eyed person, it's a genetic blue base, and the person will have come from the northern hemisphere genetically, and they tend to suffer with more what we call acid conditions in the body. So those are things like eczema, asthma, arthritis, acidity in the stomach and the intestines.
Yeah. And
more problem with their lymph systems, which is the body's waste disposal system, and also weaker kidney function as well. Now, When I say this, I want to make it clear that these are predispositions. People don't have to suffer with these, but they are the stronger predispositions for each iris colour.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'll just backtrack very slightly because I want to get this point in, is that iridology is great as a preventative tool, because, especially for children, because you can see the markings in the iris before they manifest physically. So children's eyes are forming up until the age of 7. And then after that, I encourage the mothers, my clients who are mothers, to bring their children to me so that I can help them see the map for their children's health and well-being. The theory is that if you knew that you had weak kidneys, then as you got older, you're less likely to go out and drink 10 pints of beer at night. If you knew that you had thicker blood and you were more likely to have cholesterol deposits in your arteries, then hopefully you wouldn't eat, so much fatty foods and get more exercise and so on. So for a preventative tool, it's second to none.
Yeah.
But back to the eye colours. Okay. So this is what we call a true brown eye. Yeah. And true brown-eyed people hail genetically from Asia, Africa, and the Caribbean. Yeah. They tend to have thicker blood. They tend to have issues with not being able to get toxins out of the body. So what tends to happen is the toxins will settle in the tissues and organs, and then the body will protect itself by creating a shell around the toxins, and then they're prone to cysts or growths or polyps. They tend to have issues with, as I say, thicker blood, often in the Mediterranean, the darker someone's eyes are, they might be prone to sickle cell anemia, a form of anemia. They tend to have chronic digestive system problems. So constipation is very common. Hormonal issues, because the hormones don't get transported as easily because of thicker blood. And often they're quite anxious and have nervous system problems as well. And again, if somebody's listening and they've got dark brown eyes and they're perfectly healthy, I'm just saying that these are the stronger predispositions for this iris colour.
Yeah, yeah.
So a mixed eye is a genetic blue base, and you can have a green eye, a hazel eye, or one that even looks brown. But when you look at it with a torch and a light, you will be able to see the fibres of the iris. So you know it's not a true brown iris if it looks quite dark.
Yeah. But
really, depending on whether your mixed eye is closer to the blue eye or to the brown eye, they are the predispositions that you're more likely to suffer with. Generally, though, for a mixed eye, they tend to have digestive problems, blood sugar level imbalances, and a tendency to anxiety is also common. Would you like to learn a bit about the structures in the eyes?
Yes, that should be interesting.
So, as you can see, we have 4 different quadrants to the diagram, and we're comparing the structures of the eyes to the different materials. So we have on the top right hand, as I'm looking at it, the silk iris. And I will show you some pictures in a minute. So as I say, the silk is the strongest physical constitution. The linen is the average physical constitution. And then the Hessian and the net, which have got more gaps in the iris fibres, are actually the weaker physical constitutions. So if you go to the next slide, I'll show you a silk iris. Okay, so you can see from this picture that the fibres of the iris are quite close together. There's very few gaps, if any, in that picture. So the silk iris, they're actually, as I say, they're strong physically. They've had a lot of adrenal energy, so they've pushed themselves quite hard all their lives. High-powered business women coming to me who have got silk irises. You also find the older generation. There tend to be more silk irises in the older generation, sort of 70s upwards, perhaps because they had better diets, less junk food, more fresh air. But with the silk iris, there is a tendency to worry, because when there's a lot of adrenaline pumping around the system, that can actually irritate the nervous system as well. So even though they're very physically strong, they often tend to worry about, you know, quite sort of, well, I won't say trivial, but small matters. They don't sit still for very long either. They find it very difficult to meditate or sit still. They've got strong connective tissue. So their muscles, their ligaments, their tendons, all strong. And they recover from illness well. But on the flip side, when you have tighter connective tissue, then that can make arthritis or constipation more of an issue for people as well. So as I say, you've got pros and cons, strengths and weaknesses for each iris colour and each structure, and also each, we have specific constitutions as well.
Yeah. Linen
constitution. So they're more of an average physical constitution. They'll maybe take 2 or 3 days to recover from an illness, whereas a silk iris would probably might not even take any time off work at all, a silk iris. Again, I know women who have painful menstruation, they're silk women, and I'm not going to stop, I'm just going to get on with it. You know, there's this attitude, but quite stoic attitude with silks. But with linens, they're a bit more sensitive to their needs and other people's needs, both emotionally and physically. So yeah, they're kind of average, really. So this is the weakest physical structure, because you can see these gaps in the iris fibres, which means that there are inherent weak areas, and the more of them there are, the weaker the physical constitution is. So these people tend to have lower metabolism, particularly if we see one of those gaps in the thyroid area. Yeah. They have lower physical strength. They can have energy, but they don't seem to contain their energy well. So they're likely to have quite big energy crashes if they have too many demands on them. They have sluggish bowels, particularly if the gaps are in the digestive area. And also, again, they'll take maybe 3 weeks to recover from a cold that a silk person wouldn't even take any time off. So those are the Hessian to net. I'll talk about the colours in the iris. Yeah. So there is a sort of gradient of colours, which, or acute or chronic, a condition could be. When there's a lot of white in the iris, it shows us irritation, inflammation, and can show pain as well. And somebody's likely to be suffering with pain if there's a lot of white or a lot of thick white in the iris. You also find if there's a lot of white in the iris, there's high acidity. So I don't know if you've ever seen someone who's got really white blue eyes, really like iceberg blue eyes. They usually have issues with arthritis or rheumatism or conditions that are affected by acidity in the body.
Okay.
With these people, you would be well advised to use lots of antioxidants like vitamin A. If you see yellow in an iris, then it means the acid wastes and the toxins have settled in the tissues more, and the congestion is more chronic. So, for example, in this eye, around the periphery of the iris, you can see that thick, almost like blotting around the edge of the iris. Yeah, so you see that yellow pigment.
Yeah.
So that's the lymphatic system, and so this person had quite congested lymph problems, swollen lymph glands as well, and it's often mucus forming foods like dairy and wheat that congest the lymphatic system. So this person would do very well to avoid those foods, because if you congest the lymphatic system, then the whole immune system suffers.
It's fascinating how these colours tell you about your health.
Yes, absolutely. I've got lots more slides. If you want to carry on.
Yeah, we can carry on. I'm fine with that.
Yeah. Okay. So if you go to the next slide. So where the arrow is pointing is what we call a lacuna, which means hole. And when you see a little, or sometimes people say it looks a bit like a flower petal, when you see a lacuna, you know that there's an inherent weak area in that particular part of the body. And that's been genetically passed through the generations. Their tissue integrity is poor. There are lots of different shapes of lacuna, which I can't go into all now, but you can have open lacunas or you can have a closed lacuna. So where all the sides are closed means that the weakness is more pronounced. Yeah. And then there are pigments. So pigments have showing us that there's a build-up of toxins. And obviously we would treat toxicity by giving herbs for the liver, dietary advice about foods that you could use to help keep your bloodstream more pure, drinking more water. We can look at the stomach, we can look at the intestines. For example, this picture here, there's a lot of orange-brown pigment around the stomach area. So that is showing us that there's going to be a tendency for low stomach acid, which means they won't be digesting their proteins efficiently, and low stomach enzymes, so they won't be, again, digesting their food or breaking down their food well, which can often lead to bloating, uncomfortability in the intestines, and again, sluggish bowels. Okay, so this is quite an important marking in iridology. So to you, it might look a bit like the outline of a flower. It's this yellow wave surrounding the pupil. And I did mention it before, but that was showing you on the iris map. So what we're seeing here is what we call the autonomic nerve wreath, and it's representative of the large and the small intestines, the integrity of the large and the small intestines, and and also part of the nervous system that controls breathing and digestion and heart rate. And the autonomic nervous system has a connection to all the reflexes in the iris. So if we see a deviation in this nerve wreath, then that could indicate there's poor nerve supply to a particular area, or a breaking on the nerve wreath. So if you look on the top right hand side, the blue arrow, there's a gap there between, the nerve wreath is not joining.
Yeah.
In it, it doesn't continue. So that would indicate that there would be poor nerve supply to that particular part of the body. Over on the left hand side, you can see that the nerve wreath is quite jaggedy. So it's like a zigzag pattern. Yeah. That usually means that somebody can't tolerate dairy products very well. So they would be well advised not to have dairy products in their diet. And usually that's the case. People come and they're suffering bloating, and often that zigzaggy pattern means there's a strong predisposition to spasm in the intestines as well. Okay, so where the arrow is pointing on this one, it's called an abdominal reservoir because the nerve wreath is ballooning out like a reservoir. So this is in the large intestines here, where the blue arrow is, and you can see how it's slightly bulged out from the rest of the nerve wreath. And that would be an area where, we're on to a slightly unpleasant subject now, but where feces might get trapped as it's part of the intestine that pushes up against gravity. So, and that could be an area where there would be a weakening of the intestine and feces could get trapped there, which would mean that bad bacteria would breed there. So that person would need probiotics, definitely. Fermented foods would be very helpful to them. So this one, you can see the nerve wreath is actually quite close to the pupil.
Yeah.
And that can indicate that the intestines are quite tight. So if you've got tight intestines, you won't be able to eat large meals. It will be very uncomfortable for you. So this person would need to eat quality food rather than quantity food.
In the eye can, all of those can tell you about genetic predisposition. And I'm glad you highlighted that. It doesn't mean that you now need to go and look for what's wrong with you. It is more how you can maintain good health by being aware of these things.
Absolutely. I mean, I have clients and I analyse the photographs of their irises, and there's say 20 or 30 markings. And I say to them, you don't need to go and write your will. It's okay, because I can see that. So they would just think, oh my goodness, what's wrong? I've got all these things going on. But it's just so advantageous to have that information so that, you can really capitalise on your strengths and not make your weaknesses any weaker. Yeah, and I find it a wonderful tool alongside the nutrition and the herbalism.
So when you've come up with a list of 20 issues in a client, do you hit them with one big treatment, or is it something that you gradually treat different symptoms until they are under control?
Well, what I do is I put together a treatment program for them, and I recommend any foods or whole foods or nutritional supplements or superfoods, or, as I said earlier, any naturopathic remedy that I feel will benefit them. I may even refer them to a colleague for something as well, but I'm making a very rounded, holistic approach to what I present with them. So they will go away, they put everything into practice for about 3 weeks, and then we have a review. But I do specialize in cleansing programs, because you have to clear out before new, healthier cells,
Indeed.
are allowed to, form. So there's usually, by the time people come to me, either through poor diet or high stress levels, or obviously what genetically they inherited, for years and years, these toxins or acidity has been building up in the body. So it doesn't go away straight away. You have to do it in a layered approach, really.
Mm-hmm. Chrissy, that has really been fascinating. Now, if people want to get hold of you and they want to get more information, this is your website that's now showing on the screen. And there is a contact form on the website where they can actually get hold of you, which you will respond to. And they can read more there about what you do as well and how your treatments work.
Absolutely. Yeah, be great. Be good to hear from anybody who's got any questions or want any help.
I have enjoyed every minute of it. It's been really, really interesting. So thank you very much. I really appreciate the time you spent on this. You obviously came very well prepared as well.
Thank you. Take care.
Oh,
bye.
Thank you. And our show for next week, same time, same place, is going to be also quite interesting. It's called Mindfulness in Action. Choose the right type of yoga for you. And my guest is going to be Babs Leonard-Platz, who is going to explain to us the benefits of yoga and how not every type of yoga fits everybody. You have to choose the right one for you. And she will also give us guidance on how to choose that. Thank you for listening to us. Goodbye.